consider successful entrepreneurs or sole proprietors, and I wanted to give a quick explanation before I get into interviewing Seth Getz here. Seth, when I look at you and what you're doing as being very unique, I want to explain this, why I consider it unique. First, there's many different categories or structures that people can become employed into: corporations, small businesses, even partnerships or family businesses. Now, you've succeeded in the category of a sole proprietorship, but in a unique segment of even that, partly because of the culture that we're in today, one that allows a sole proprietor to operate as though they were themselves a larger business, what I would call an organization of one. So, to begin, do you see yourself in that unique position? One, not only that you're different from the other organizations around, but also different from similar sole proprietorships throughout history.
I would say the environment has changed a little bit. I think that even when I started some previous businesses, you start out the small business, and one of the objectives is, how do we look bigger than we are? How do we look big? How do we look like we're actually something substantial, like we've been around for a while? And going through that, now it's not, first of all, it's much easier to look larger than you used to be, but also it's not necessary. People are not looking for being big or being as being better. There's the tagline that you'll see very few companies use anymore, but it used to be very common. You know, we've been serving clients since such and such a year. And that was meant to build credibility. And the size of your company, well, we are this many person organization, those two were actually meant to give people confidence in you. And those two statements aren't as relevant anymore in today's environment. People actually appreciate when you are real and authentic as an individual. So it's easier to look larger than you are, but it's also easier to just be who you are, and people are more accepting of that. So the environment has changed for the solo entrepreneur. That's easier for them, and they can do it. Society accepts it more so.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there that conscientious of establishing yourself or wanting to be or look larger to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was it that you came upon in your career or your path that made you realize, hey, I don't have to? What did you see something in particular, or did you meet someone, read something?
It wasn't so much that. It was just trying things and experimenting with it. I began seeing a couple people who were just themselves. I began just trying to, instead of putting on a front, I began just showing up as me. When I started, when I started doing what I was doing, which is advising business owners, I was 22 years old, and I looked like I was 16, okay? So I figured my age is going to be a real impediment to me going forward. So therefore, I tried to do stuff like I was only going to take meetings on the phone. So if someone wanted to talk to me, okay, we're going to set the meeting on the phone because I'm too busy to actually go out and do it, was kind of the idea. And I tried to do that just so that I could appear older, so that I could appear more like a business, whatever it was that I was trying to appear. And it didn't work that well. It didn't come across very well. I began just going ahead and saying, let's just show up as I am. Let's just show up who I am at a meeting and seeing what happens. And from that, good things started to happen. Good relationships started to form. So I realized, you know what, it's better if I actually show up as me. I used to think that when I went out, I should dress up into a suit coat with a tie and wingtips and all that. I realized, no, it's far better to just show up as just being me and not try to put on this presence of worrying about what are people going to think about me and will it take me seriously. People take you seriously when you take yourself seriously.
Just for the record, you still look like you're 16.
I know, and people still works though. So,
but that's a good segue to getting into the beginning. You talked about being young and trying to impress people. And in your bio, you mentioned that you've been, quote, starting businesses ever since you can remember. So I was curious of what the earliest memory that Seth Getz has that you might consider one of those businesses.
Well, I can remember going and trying to do something such as I was drawing these pictures and I had this grand plan of going and selling these pictures door to door to people. I think it was a picture of just a simple, two mountains and a little sun coming out between them, and that was the entire picture. And that was our plan. I don't think I ever did it, but other ones are just simple finding a small need and filling it. People just mentioning that they needed wood stuck into their basement. For their wood stoves. Okay, I can do that. And so they would hire me to stick wood in their basement. By the time, that was somewhere around 6, that my brother and I would do that. 7, I started a paper route. And I had this paper bag, and they had to tie it up. So because the paper bag would be dragging on the ground, I was so short. So I had to tie it all up, and it was still kind of bouncing around my ankles. And but I did that every morning, every single morning. I'd get up at 6 o'clock and deliver all these papers. And it was a great experience of having to be responsible because they had to be delivered every single day. Every single day they had to be delivered. I had to meet the needs of my customers because I was going to their house. They wanted it put in a particular place. One person wanted me to walk in his porch and put it inside his door or behind the chair, or something. They all had their own unique things that they wanted done. Okay, I can meet that. Going and collecting money from those people. This is not the situation where the paper company got the customers. I was the one who had to go get the customers. So I had to go out there on other days, on Saturdays, and sell people a subscription to the newspaper that I would then deliver to them. So it was like this full-scale business that I did. It was a great experience. I did that for a number of years. I would jump into situations where by 9, when it snowed in wintertime, I would be down, I would get up earlier to deliver my papers, and then I would head downtown to shovel out the town doctor's office. And then I would shovel out the town library, and then I would shovel out the town retirement center, and then I would have about 4 homes that I would shovel out. And so basically for the entire, most of the day, I was busy shoveling. And I was able to make a good bit of money from that as a little kid. So just a lot of stuff like that. Just finding a need and finding a need and not waiting for someone else to come and offer me a possibility, but just going out there and finding a need and saying, hey, I can do that. Why don't I do that for you? The way I got some of those shoveling clients was actually just on a snowy day after I finished my regular route. I would go and I would shovel someone's driveway or someone's walkway. And they'd come out and say, who are you? I'm Seth, and why are you doing this? Well, it needs to be done. Oh, can I pay you? Sure. And it worked because I was a little kid. It's not the best strategy, but it worked in that situation. So just some interesting stories from that. But no, it's just been something I've always liked to do, is just finding a need and filling it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen the benefit of selling with a 6-year-old kid. It's hard to say no.
Yes, exactly. Political season, my older sisters would take me to retirement communities and would have me memorize a spiel for the campaign and send me door to door because nobody at that place is ever going to shut a door on a 6-year-old. It just doesn't happen. So
I'll have to talk to your sister about that.
Yes.
So, you've answered some of the questions that I was going to ask about that, like what you learned. So that's good, and I don't have to hit back on that. But one more thing about your bio is that you mentioned that you stepped into the E-Myth from Michael Gerber, and that you realized that you were falling into the same trap that so many other small business owners were falling into. Can you elaborate more on what that trap was that you've seen?
All these questions, I wasn't really posing these questions to my business. I was just kind of letting it drift wherever the customers took it. And I saw how that just kind of left me in some bad spots in many cases, in spots I didn't want to be. And so actually started to take a look at, what am I building here? What am I trying to accomplish? What's the business going to look like? How big is it going to be? How many people are going to be in it? Whatever. Laying that stuff out there to say, what's this business going to be when it grows up? And thinking it through, and then going to work in my business to accomplish that goal, versus just kind of floating with the needs. You can get by for a while floating on just what's the needs out there, as I did as a young kid. But I didn't really go out and design the business the way I should. So,
Now,
and Michael Gerber, in the book, The E-Myth, kind of helped me lay that out and say, you need to deliberately focus on the strategic elements of your business and build those things.
were these ideas that you were having and then you ran into the E-Myth, or would you say that the E-Myth might have spurred them on or sparked them?
You know, I think that in so many cases when you read a book and it resonates with you, it's because subconsciously you were already processing those similar thoughts, but you've never given them voice. And then all of a sudden someone comes along with a book that gives you a voice and says, yes, that's it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, I resonate with that. Why? Is it because they came up with something new? No, it's because they gave voice to what was going on with you. I've given that book to other people, and sometimes people are just come back with their eyes are opened, and it's just amazing because they were going through some of the same pain. Other people I've given the book to said, yeah, it was okay. Good book. Because they weren't quite ready for it. They weren't going through the same mentality yet.
Do any other books stand out in your mind in your past, other than E-Myth, that might have done that same thing to you, caused your eyes to go, oh, I've been thinking that?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Recently, Inbound Marketing was good. Just talked about the shift in marketing culture in the world today. The book I read, The Wisdom of Crowds, talked about how experts are not always right, but crowds can be very accurate. We don't tend to give them much voice, but they can be very good. Kind of gives you faith in democracy. Let's see, what else? There's lots of them. Dan Kennedy's book, Ultimate Marketing Plan, just gave, he just said very clearly some of the things I've thought of in many cases, but I've never really put and organized in such a way that he has. So I just read it, I was like, yep, I resonate with that.
Are there any other resources, other than reading books and finding authors that really support your ideas, but resources business-wise that you've been able to draw upon throughout the years as something that you would attribute to your success?
Going after new areas and new ideas. Trying to not stay with the books you're familiar with, but actually just going out there and seeing other books and just picking them up and reading them, trying other things, and just getting new ideas into place, because we tend to get stuck in ruts, and it can really affect our long-term thinking. So going after some new material, new concepts that just aren't the ones. E-Myth wasn't one that was really on my radar screen at all until a friend said, you should read this. Okay, I'll read it. And just went from there. So just trying to find different ones. Going to Barnes & Noble library and just going and getting a pile of books and skim reading them. Really can get you some interesting ideas.
Now, in the past, you've attributed warehouse or networking with other entrepreneurs as something that spurs you on or sparks new growth. If you don't want to elaborate on that, but bring in some other resources other than books, maybe, like an outsourcing resource or a downtown or community resource that you as a solo business owner have been able to look upon and say, I'm going to take advantage of that. Because there might be people out there, and part of the reason why I want to do the video too is because people hopefully are watching that not only want to know you more, but that want to do what you're doing. And if there was anything that you could say, oh, you've got to take advantage of this, and I've seen a lot of people take advantage of that, what might that be?
I'll say a mistake that I made early on was I had this great plan of a marketing plan to market my business. I was going to do direct mail and speaking. It was kind of this whole laid out plan. Here's the problem with that. I didn't really understand my target market. I thought I understood them. I thought I grasped it. But I really didn't grasp the full pain of what they're going on. I didn't talk quite yet their language. I had some knowledge about them, but I didn't talk their language. So for me, it started to turn the corner when I started joining up with networking groups, where I would go there and they'd say, well, Seth, what do you do? And I have to say what I did. And they would give me this blank look. They didn't get it. And so I would go to the next person and say, what do you do? And I'd explain what I did, and they didn't get it either. And I had to go through this again and again. I kept on tweaking it and working it to actually explain it. And that was a starting point to actually explain what I do. But really, really it gets down to, it's not at the networking event. Really what it is networking event is a place for you to meet some people that you can develop a relationship with. And so you actually meet up with them other times, in other places, a coffee shop, whatever, where you actually meet up with them and talk more in depth about what you do, about what they do. And those things are what makes a huge difference. It's the relationships. It's the pushing each other. It's the challenging each other. It's the swapping books. It's swapping ideas. It's being invited to different things with those people. It's the relationships and the bouncing back and forth. It's going, I call it nose to nose and toe to toe with your client base to understand who they are, instead of trying to stay back in this ivory tower situation where you think, I think I understand what you guys are going through. No, it's just going nose to nose with those people and saying, talking to them and watching their reactions to things. Getting out there and tell your story again and again and again. If you're trying to be solo, your brand is very much you. It's not so much of a brand to be thought through and worked through in a typical marketing sense where you've got these bunch of creative people who say, what's the brand? The brand is you. And you have to both become the brand, you have to embody the brand, but the brand is also who you are authentically. And so the thing to do to develop that brand is not to sit back and say, what should my brand be about? What should I do with it? To some extent, you can do some thinking like that, but also just get out there and say it. Tell your story. Tell your story again and again and again so that it starts becoming real, so that you understand your own story, your own, what you're trying to accomplish. That's what you've got to do, is get out there and tell your story.
Okay, now my next question might even summarize almost the rest of my questions that I had on the paper here, but I think it's appropriate because what you've brought me to is a point where you said from a large company idea down to it's just me and we're going to market, I have to market me and I'm the business, which is what I'm talking about, the org of one. However, where do you get to the point where it's expandable? And then what do you do with Seth Getz? Or I've just marketed myself and I've been the business but I want it to be something that lives beyond Seth.
First of all, you got to be clear of what you're trying to do. A little bit about myself is that with my business, I had plans of growing into a large business. I worked through that, tried it, and I came to the conclusion that, no, actually I don't want a big business of doing what I do. I'm not trying to create a big organization doing what I do. It just doesn't seem to be a real good business model. And people look at me like, well, I'm it. I mean, it's one box, me. You know, no. Write up an organization chart that has all the different functions in your business. My business, well, it is basically just me and my business, has 18 different functions, 18 different jobs in the business. Most of them I do. I outsource some of them, but most of them I do. So I wear a lot of different hats. But write up an organizational chart that shows you what are all the different positions in your business. And then start saying, okay, how can I get myself out of these different areas? You could start out with outsourcing. Outsourcing is one of those things that they talk about in big businesses, but they don't talk about as much in small businesses, and yet it is perfect for small businesses. Just perfect for small business. It's great. You can outsource so many different functions you do, allowing you to do what you do extremely well, where you are the magic, much better. So give yourself some flexibility with that, but then also start looking and saying, okay, how am I going to get myself out of all these boxes? Choose where your ending box is if you're going to stay in the business, and figure out how am I going to fill all these other boxes in the organization chart. It's the process of letting out each of those boxes before you bring on a person. Mistake that a lot of businesses make is they bring on person number 2. And the idea is, okay, you're going to do what I do. And I'm all over the place because I'm the only one in business, so you're going to be all over the place too. And any time that I don't catch up, you're going to help me with it. it's a huge mistake in businesses to try to run a business that way, to try to actually make it so that it works that way. Much better to lay out your organization, figure out, okay, what's the different functions of the business? Let me take one function, organize this thing excessively, lay it out, try it myself, run the systems, lay out the tools, whatever's necessary to make this function work. And then bring on the next person and say, okay, guess what? This is you. I'm going to still handle all the other stuff. I want you to master this one. Now you can later on give them a second job because, hey, this is a small business. We do multiple things. But try to give them, but instead of just saying, hey, come in and join me in my chaos here. Instead, come on in. I want you to master this one. And we're not going to go anywhere else until you've mastered this one. And that way I don't ever have to step into that role again. And then we're going to go into this one. And you're going to master that one. Or we're going to bring in the next person. Okay, you're going to master this one. And step it through the business from your organizational chart. If you're trying to build a larger organization, you've got to look at that organizational chart. Well, it's still just you. Trying to just bring in the next person just because I'm busy is a recipe for usually a lot of headaches and a lot of hassle.
Now, establishing your goal, you said your goal is not the same as someone else's if they're looking for a big organization. So establishing your goal might dictate what your boxes might look like then.
Exactly. Because what you do is you look at the business as it is in your mind when it's fully developed. That fully developed business. And you lay out the organization chart of that business. Say, what does this business look like?
Okay. And when you're filling your boxes, you're not only using people to fill in those boxes on site, but that's where you would talk about your outsourcing as well.
Some boxes are filled by outsourcing. Some boxes are filled by insourcing, hiring people. You kind of lay it out. Some boxes are perfect that way for outsourcing.
Okay. What do you see for the future in business for solo entrepreneurs or sole proprietors? I mean, we've seen it change tremendously from 100 years ago, 50 years ago, to now. Do you see any changes for the future for not only for the solo entrepreneurs, but for yourself as well in the future?
I am one of the worst prognosticators of the future that I know. I just don't. I don't try for the most part. I can tell you that the technology has made it so easy to run a solo small business. 50 years ago, there was a huge, what one man termed it as transaction cost to running an organization. If you run an organization, you've got to do all these things, and it's really hard to do all these things well. Well, today, with the computer and with the internet, you can make up for almost all those things that before you had to have a whole organization to make up for. So you can do what no small organizations in the past could do. So the opportunity is perfect there for the small businesses, for the solo entrepreneurs, for that person who wants to be their own brand, for the person who wants to create, for the person who wants to partner with others. The tools are there like they've never been there in the past. And it's just awesome to see. I don't know where this is going to take us. I can see a lot more by way of not having large organizations, but loose coalitions of small businesses. Instead of it being a top-down, this is the organization, this is the brand, and when you come under this thing, instead, it's a coalition, a co-op, whatever, of a variety of different people who are trying to do the same thing. I can see a lot more of that starting to form and starting to grow and becoming the business organizations, but the business organization word is going to have a different term. It's going to have a different sense at that point in time, because it's not a company like Walmart, where, okay, it's a Walmart. If you were a Walmart employee, no, it's a group of people, but you're working on your own thing.
You know, it's amazing to think about what the future could hold. If we've gone, who would have thought that farming is going to be done by one or two people? You can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, but to think about what in the future one or two people are going to be able to accomplish.
You think about, I'll give you an example of Twitter. How many people are employed at Twitter?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay? But could it be and 3 people run that whole place.
I know Craigslist, or I've heard Craigslist is run by very few people.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
this massive worldwide, I mean, everybody knows Craigslist, and it's run off this little bitty operation that everybody knows, though. Everybody's aware of it. Everybody uses it, and it's a huge organization, and yet they can be just this teeny little group. You can have an organization where you have this brand name that's awesome, and that people are used to, but so much of what you do is actually outsourced. But you just hold the secret sauce together and make it all work. It's going to be interesting to see just how big small organizations can become, because it used to be that there was no way you could get big without hiring a lot of employees. Now you can get big through just smart use of what you've got. It's amazing what can happen out there. So yeah, no, with information, because of the way that it works, because the flow of bits of information, it doesn't cost any, you don't have to carry anything physically. It's just a flow that happens there via machines, and it works. You can just have this flow back and forth, and it doesn't take much to actually run it and make it work. So.
Good. Do you have anything that you want to add before I?
No.
No. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.